John Rocha here, just taking a moment to give a little bit of love to the people that power and sponsor this spoiler review, episode 1 of Moon Knight, and that is the fine folks over there at Carbon Health. They've got 100 plus locations across 14 states, 50 plus locations in California, across the Bay Area, Los Angeles, Sacramento, and North San Diego, kind of near where I live. Most locations will have COVID testing and travel testing for overseas destinations. That's right, people are still getting tested for this, so it's good that you've got a center near you. Go and find out so you can get tested. And they've done over 2 million COVID tests, so they're very experienced in doing that. And if you're in California, consider scheduling an annual checkup and utilizing primary care services at your local clinic. Do you want to find a healthcare provider that is an active partner supporting you in your efforts to feel better and live healthier? We continue to partner with them because Carbon Health genuinely cares about positive communities who engage with each other over the love of culture and expressions of life. And certainly the Geek Buddies community is one of those communities, and they speak about them to me all the time, how much they enjoy watching the chat, seeing the back and forth, seeing the responses, all those kinds of things when we're doing live shows. Carbon Health is watching and they enjoy it. Very kind of them. You can even download the app for Carbon Health to keep a, quote, doc in the pock for those immediate urgent care needs, whether you book an in-person visit or a virtual visit. So go to carbonhealth.com today and get checked out. All right, let's get on with this spoiler review episode for episode 1 of Moon Knight. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a spoiler review episode here for Moon Knight, episode 1 from the
Geek Buddies. Hey! There it is. There it is. Thank you. Thank you.
Of course, you're welcome. Cheers to you. Bottoms up.
Well,
it's back. Diet Coke, your drink of choice.
Okay. And a glass?
A glass for a Diet Coke. Looks like a 2-liter glass.
Come on now. Put it in the can.
Welcome to everybody to this spoiler review for episode 1, The Goldfish Problem, here for Moon Knight for Marvel and Disney+. We're going to keep this one relatively short. We're trying to do about 45, 50 minutes. It's the first episode, so we're going to take it a little bit slow or a little bit quick through this episode and have some fun. Let's introduce ourselves. I'm the Outlaw John Rocha, writer, producer, and host here on the Geek Buddies. Mike?
I'm Michael Vogel. I'm a writer and producer, animated TV shows and movies.
Shan?
And this is Shannon McClung. I'm an animation writer and a television actor where you may have seen me on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and Silicon Valley.
And joining us, thankfully, for these reviews here, straight from Corruption Headquarters, Mike Kalinowski. How are you, Mike?
Gentlemen.
Noted author, noted pundit, noted everything. How are you?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
Good. You're a mad Moon Knight fan, so
yes, sir.
I'll go to you first. I'll go to you first. Goldfish Problem. Tell me your overall thoughts on this show. Remember, this is a spoiler review episode, so if you haven't watched the episode, ladies and gentlemen, go back and watch it. Come back and join us. Kalinowski, talk to me. What was your feelings about this overall episode here?
I guess I should do this disclaimer. I come into Moon Knight. I like him from a certain area of his stuff. So the whole Mr. Knight stuff, I don't like. That stuff came in the past 10 years. And someone on Twitter wrote, like, what is a comic thing that's happened, changed, that someone did, and it was going to not stick around, and then it took over the character, that you didn't like, and that was one of those things I put, was like, I don't like the Mr. Knight stuff. So when that was in the thing, I was like, okay. And seeing what we got, I'm going to say this. It's not the show that I wanted.
Oh, no. Right off the bat.
Okay. You have to open yourself up to different things. They're picking and choosing from the different things.
Yes.
The Marc Spector that I like is the James Bond tuxedo, suave, elegant English guy. So that was right away off the bat. So all the stuff that I love about Moon Knight, probably around the time you got into him. Yeah. It's none of that.
Right.
So I have to adjust my expectations. What I saw of what they're doing is I loved. But it's not the Moon Knight that I wanted and was hoping to see. So I'm going in now having to switch everything.
Okay. All right. This one directed by Justin Benson, Mohammed Diab, who has directed 4 of the episodes, and Aaron Moorhead. Both those guys, Benson and Moorhead, are directing the last 2 episodes. This is, of course, from creator Jeremy Slater as well, and based on the characters by Doug Mensch and Dan Perlin. Oscar Isaac, Ethan Hawke, Mia Calamawy. Mike, I go to you. First episode, did this get you going in the right direction for Moon Knight? And what's your experience with Moon Knight as a character in the Marvel Comics?
Well, I think we said this as we talked about it on the main show. Like, I'm not super familiar with Moon Knight. Like, he's not a character that I know a ton about. I know him sort of peripherally when he shows up in a mega crossover, but I don't know a ton about him. So saying that, I loved everything about this episode.
Okay.
I thought it was great. I don't have any preconceived idea of who I think Moon Knight should be, so I kind of just took everything as it was. But the style of the show, the way they kind of laid everything out, the way they presented everything, the way they kind of threw you into the deep end and you just had to sort of rush to keep up was great. And then also, as like a Neil Gaiman fan, as a fan of like just mythology in general, all the Egyptian mythology stuff that is in there, super intrigued, can't wait to hear more about it. Like really, really into all those aspects of the story.
Okay, Shannon McClung, thoughts on this? As he mentions, Michael mentions here the Egyptian mythology here. Kalinowski on the side of not quite feeling how they're going in terms of the opening approach. We have Stephen Grant. We have him working for a museum. He's a gift shop guy. And then by the end of the episode, we've met Marc Spector. We've met the Moon Knight. What did you think about how they laid out what we're going to be dealing with here in this episode, especially the dissociative identity disorder stuff that is right off the bat?
So I think what would have worked better for me personally is having 2 episodes.
Okay.
Not being overly familiar with the character. Like I know sort of the basics, but I like what we're being given. I don't like how they're giving it to us right now. I think the strength of this show lies 100% on the cast. I think Oscar Isaac is doing a fantastic job. Ethan Hawke looks like he is having a blast. I'm not crazy about some of the directorial choices that Mohamed Dia gave us, and especially towards the end. I actually do like how, which I get would probably be a criticism from some folks. I like how in this first episode that Steven kind of phases out and we don't get to see the badass action because as through the audience, we're watching this through Steven's eyes. I think by the time we get to the end, I feel like as an audience, we have deserved a better look at stuff. And I don't think we got that.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Kind of interesting. Okay. I liked it. I thought it was a good beginning. Got me excited to see more from Moon Knight for sure. I enjoyed Oscar Isaac's performance doing both of these characters, 2 completely different characters, as Kalinowski alluded to. I've been a fan of Moon Knight since the 1990s, and Mikey knows when at the end of Comic-Cons, I come back with stacks of Moon Knight or stacks of Iron Fist or stacks of New Avengers graphic novels to come back into the world of Moon Knight every single time. I love it. I love the changes. And I hear you about Mr. Knight there, Kalinowski. Certainly a divisive character for some of the hardcore Moon Knight fans, and an interesting thing to see if that's going. Obviously, we see the promo for episode 2. That is going to come in to episode 2 and see what version of that or how it's going to come in.
It's because one of my favorite runs is the one with Bendis and Maliev they did in the 2000s, where he was his great. 3 identities were Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Captain America. So I love different takes. This is just I have to go in. It's not giving me what I wanted, but that's one of the best things. Hey, give me something new. I might like this even more at the very end of 6 episodes. So I'm going in open-minded. I'm just not. It's the stuff that looking forward, 10 years ago when you told me there was going to be a Moon Knight TV series, I was like, I can't wait. Oh my God, it's going to be incredible. And now it's like, it's not what I wanted. Okay. It could be something better.
Can I ask you, I'm literally just curious because I'm not as familiar. Do you think we saw a little bit of Marc Spector, definitely not like a James Bond per se, but definitely like a badass, some kind of agent. Do you feel like there's a chance that when we get to spend more time with Marc Spector, as Shannon said, we kind of were very much in this episode in Stephen Grant's perspective. Do you feel like when we spend some more time with Marc Spector, you might enjoy it more? What's
interesting is Marc is usually the main persona.
Right.
Stephen Grant is not. So the fact that you're using Grant is the main one. And he did mention he's a mercenary. So that's Stephen Grant, or Marc Spector is the mercenary. But then there's Jake Lockley, who's like the cab driver. I don't know. And the writer recently said, we're not doing Marlena, we're not doing Frenchie, we're not doing Bushmaster, the characters that I associate with the character Moon Knight. So I'm kind of going, this is what we're getting. Let's go for it. So I don't know. But I also kind of would, to Shannon's point of the flip of the characters, I thought there would have been a distinct difference between Mark and Steven. When he looks in the mirror, they look the exact same. I thought the guy would be more put together, had a different haircut. Just little changes to show the personality switch, but I'm on board. I mean, I'm definitely not next week. I don't know.
It's an interesting approach because you've got him not wanting to wake up. Clearly, he's going into this Marc Spector person in different ways, and he's trying to tie himself to the bed. He's trying to put sand around the bed, the Rubik's Cube, listening to podcasts. So clearly, days disappear for this guy. Time disappears for this guy. So clearly, Marc Spector has a hold on his body, uses his body for whatever he needs him for. And then we get Khonshu coming in, the great F. Murray Abraham, with the more recent look of Khonshu with that long nose thing, a mask that he wears there, which is very reminiscent of stuff you might see in Neil Gaiman's Sandman. So I thought that was an interesting design for him overall. But I personally liked the way they laid this down. I think they went this route because they want to give you a little bit of time to feel sympathetic to this guy, to connect to this guy, to kind of feel something for this guy. And then we get Layla, by the end of what's the connection there as well with the phone? Who is she representing? Is she representing who we've seen in the comics before, his love interest and partner in the comics before, or is something else going on here? And of course, Duchamp is right there as he's scrolling down on the phone. So certainly Duchamp may be a part of this at some point down the road, even though we haven't heard casting for that character yet. So there's a lot of allusions to the Moon Knight mythology, and some of those characters have names of Moon Knight characters. They're just in different positions in Stephen Grant's world versus Marc Spector's world.
That's a good point.
This will be fascinating, though. I think they wanted you to kind of feel sympathetic because it's a new character for a lot of people. Mike, you and I, of the four of us, you and I are the only ones that read this stuff and all this stuff. So I think it's a good way in, and then maybe we'll get Spector more and more as the series goes along.
I should say this. For me, I guess maybe why I gravitated Moon Knight was he was always considered Marvel's Batman.
Yeah.
So they're showing completely different, going a different route. I think that's the strength of this show. I'm actually the more we talk about it with you guys, the more excited I am about where it could go doing something. What I loved is it didn't connect to any of the MCU. This is its own, and I loved that. Loved that about this episode.
And let's talk more about Ethan Hawke. Ethan Hawke coming in here. Harrow is a really, really minor villain in the Moon Knight world. He's just a guy who studies pain and whatever. But Shannon, I'll go to you first on this. We see from the beginning he's like Paul Bettany in the Da Vinci Code, crushing broken glass, wanting to feel the pain to be closer to God. But the god is an Egyptian god called Ammit that he feels will judge the world and judge people minority report wise before they even commit crimes. And he mentions all these people. He doesn't mention Thanos, which goes to Kalinowski's point that they are kind of separating it from the MCU. But what an interesting performance from a guy who, had some choice words to say about the Logan film. What did you think about him coming in here and playing Harrow?
Well, again, it looks like he's just having a really, really good time. That he gets to be this, on the surface, just an absolute villain. He's chewing scenery in the smallest bites possible because it is a very reserved performance, even though he's totally leaning into the bad guy thing. I love the effect of the cane with the scales on his arm. I think that's a really cool, fun effect. Again, I just wish we had gotten to know a little bit. I wish we'd gotten a second episode. And again, a lot of my gripes might be by the end of the series, they might not be there. Like, this is just how this particular series is being presented. But I think Ethan Hawke is having a really good time. And one thing that I think is a lot of fun is how many scenes he's already had with Oscar Isaac in the first episode. And that's not something you normally get, is your protagonist and your antagonist sharing the screen that much right off the bat. But I think Arthur Harrow is going to be a very fun character. To the separation of the MCU-ness, I actually think that's a mistake. I mean, as he's talking about, and this is obviously not his performance, this is just the writing. I don't know how you can bring up all these things that Ammit could have stopped, and you don't bring up Thanos. I mean, I don't know how you don't bring up this thing that has affected the entire globe. And obviously, that was a very deliberate choice. But that, to me, was to me, it's a mistake, but maybe maybe by the end of the series, that's going to be addressed.
Yeah, and maybe Harrow was okay with half the population being eradicated, possibly. Vogel, what did you think about Ethan Hawke here coming in and doing what he's doing? The cane, the kind of moving around, the slow pace, the back and forths. I mean, certainly that opening where Oscar Isaac is, his body is moving around, not wanting to give him the scarab there. Did you like that? And then later, the conversation, philosophical discussion with him that leads to that jackal coming after him. What do you think?
I mean, look, I love a philosophical discussion, so I was here for it. Really quickly, first of all, I'm gonna side with Kalinowski on this one. I think it's refreshing that, look, I love a WandaVision. I love a Hawkeye. I love that we now have Marvel TV shows that don't have to call the attack on New York the incident. Like, I love that we live in this integrated universe. Yeah. But as we're getting into these weirder corners of the MCU, and Moon Knight is definitely a weirder corner, I think they're kind of smart to keep it a bit removed. I think that Shannon's probably right. Like, we'll get there. He is in the MCU, and there are things that could easily come up. But I kind of like that he's in his own little world. They're you know, like, we live in a world where there's lots of celebrities and things, and not all of us every day are dealing with them. So I think it's fair to say that he's not. And I kind of am enjoying them sort of eking out their own little corner. Mm-hmm. As far as the performances, I think just watching these two on screen together is a delight that we don't normally get on television. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are two like A+ performances, and as much as Hawke is sort of leaning into the villain of it all, there's a lot of humor that these two are getting out of it. Like even in the midst of this philosophical debate and everything that's happening, like just the complete confusion. Like you said, like when Oscar Isaac is like, you know, like pulling back the scarab and he's like, I didn't mean to do that, and he's like, I really need you to give me that scarab. like that. There's actual comedy that they're mining out of the scene, and I think that's where I know that the other Mike here sometimes complains about like the quippy Marvel humor, which I do understand, but I think this was really fun character-based humor. This was humor that was coming out of the situation, and it really worked for me.
Well, and the thing about the humor thing is that's a big part of Moon Knight. Moon Knight is weird with their humor and then insane with the bloody stakes of what they go through. The best people that do the runs of Moon Knight walk that line between funny stuff or uncomfortably funny stuff and brutality. So Kalinowski, what did you think about how Ethan Hawke is bringing this character of Harrow to life? By the way, the character of Harrow in the comics is not a cult leader, is not anything like this.
Right.
So this is a new kind of approach to this character that is topical. A cult leader, whether it's religious or political or what have you, we're dealing with cult leaders all the time, and people are into those documentaries. So an interesting approach. Apparently Ethan Hawke had a lot to do with the construction of this character, according to Jeremy Slater and other people involved in the production. So did you like what he did with this character? Did you like how they're setting up this back and forth between both of them?
That whole thing, like of a cult leader, like a Koresh, you know, David Koresh.
David Koresh, that's what we based it on. Yeah.
Man, it just hits home because it's prevalent. You see it all the time. And how do these people see this, and how do they believe in this, and the power of these people? He does remind me with his hair of a person that Shannon and I both know and worked for. So it does make me think sometimes of him. You know what I'm talking about, McClung, the hair.
I have an idea.
Yeah. Nice guy. I like him. But so every time I see him with that long hair, I'm like, well, I hope he's his stunt double for the show because he's a dead ringer for him. But it does every now and then take me a little bit out of it. But yeah, like you guys have already said, the acting is great. So again with Moon Knight, like he doesn't have a great rogues gallery. So with the character himself, I'm kind of more protective of what I want to see. But the villains, go for it. Whatever.
Go to town.
But what I did love about the tone of this. Yeah. A lot of people talk, you know, now we've got Daredevil in the MCU or Matt Murdock. Like, I can't see Charlie Cox's Daredevil swinging around with Spider-Man and Tom Holland. I don't see that. But I can see his Daredevil and Moon Knight, even from the little glimpse we got of them, absolutely being in a scene together and it working. So they're kind of crafting this darker corner, and it hasn't been that dark per se so far, but it just felt, I don't want to say Netflix-ish with their Marvel stuff. It just felt different. Like, Blade, their Blade going this way, and maybe Black Knight, definitely nice little corner that they're crafting for themselves here.
Midnight Suns, right, Kalinowski? Midnight Suns is in play.
If they ever want to bring in Ghost Rider, I think, they got a nice thing going on here. They've started.
It seems to, if it's in play, they're lining up some really top actors to take these roles if they do the Midnight Suns route, which seems to be where they're going. Let's switch to a little bit. We'll talk about me and Calamawy in just a second, but let's switch to some action. Shannon, you're the action guy on this foursome here. How did you feel about the action? I know we went blipped in out, but we still got some car chase stuff. We still got a little bit of fight sequences there with Moon Knight beating up that jackal or whatever that thing is. What did you think about how they did the minimal amount of action sequences that are in this first episode?
You know, I thought the action worked better when we didn't see it. I thought it worked better when he kind of blipped in and blipped out. When we get to that car chase, This on the heels of what can be done. You know, you watch that great chase in Hawkeye, and this one just felt a little lacking. You know, there was some visual effects issues, in my opinion. I think when he woke up in the Alps, to me, it was very, you know, it was very much like a visual effects shot that didn't look quite great.
Okay.
And they were leaning into the comedy because you had, you know, Wake Me Up Before You Go playing. I actually thought it was very funny when he used the cupcake as a weapon. I thought that was funny, but I just didn't think it was shot that well. It just wasn't exciting to me. There was actually even a shot when the cupcake van is backwards, the car in front of him makes contact, and Oscar Isaac doesn't react. And it's like, to me, that's something that sticks out to me like a sore thumb. Like, oh, I can't even watch that right now. Right. And like the CGI of the log truck, and even the CGI of the cupcake being flung off the roof. It was just sort of like, I really wanted something a little more visceral. And I think when you get to the end, this was another mistake that I think they made, is not giving us a full shot of whatever that jackal creature was. Like, I really think you're relying too much on Oscar Isaac's reaction, which his reactions were fantastic. But I think that sequence would have been a little more satisfying if you get a really solid shot of this creature approaching and stalking Steven. I think that would have been better. When we get into the bathroom, I totally agree with Kalinowski. I was like, Marc Spector needs to look different. And if anything, if you can't change his hair, like, I get what they're doing, that it's an honest reflection, except for the action. I think you got to put the camera on him a lot closer. You have to see in his face. These are two different individuals. The little blip of the fight that we got, I actually thought that was great. I thought that was handled perfectly. Would I have liked more? Yes. But I thought that was handled correctly. The action thus far is again just on the heels of what they can do. They just didn't do it in this first episode. But again, by the time we get to the end of the series, it could be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. And remember, we're seeing this opening episode of Vogel through Stephen Grant's eyes, pretty much. And so maybe this is the way he sees action, because he's a frazzled, unstable, unsettled guy. And I get it. You want to shoot outside to make it cool. But if we're seeing everything inside the truck as he's moving around, it kind of adds to the more of the disjointed look of the action. Or do you think they just didn't shoot it well? What do you think?
I just didn't think it was shot well. I mean, especially with the jackal. I mean, he's full on looking at that thing. So, like, why we didn't see a better shot of it, to me, was a little frustrating.
All right, Vogel?
Shannon is better looking at action than I am. I enjoy a good action scene. And when I see a great action scene, like in Hawkeye, the car chase, I'm well aware of it. And sometimes when I see a really bad action scene, I'll be like, woof. Like some of the scenes in Book of Boba. But like, I do think that for me, it's always about the character. And what I really loved about this episode is that we saw everything through Stephen Grant's eyes. And for Stephen Grant, he has literally no clue what's going on. So for me, Oscar Isaac's performance and his confusion and kind of being in the middle of an action sequence, blipping out, blipping back in, and being completely baffled as to what's going on kind of carried me through. Like, to me, I thought it was a really thrilling sequence, even if the action wasn't particularly as up to par as, like, say, the Hawkeye chase scene. And even with the jackal at the end, I don't disagree that it would have been cooler to see the jackal, but I also feel like we are easing into Egyptian crazy shit here. And we already, we see some things. We see Khonshu coming down the hallway, obviously. We can see that pretty clearly. But I don't know that we need to see, I don't know that we're going to see more jackal later, or there's going to be more jackals later. So we wanted to, like, not go fully into this one. Like, I think we'll be able to take it as a whole. And I might agree with Shannon completely by the time we get to the end of the series. But for right now, I just loved that we were getting little bits of it as Stephen Grant was completely kind of off his game. And and on the whole, Marc Spector looking different, I do think they're trying, because they've made a big deal out of this and they talked a lot about it, is really trying to treat dissociative identity disorder as realistically as possible. And realistically, if Stephen Grant is going to just flip back and forth between Marc Spector,
Yeah.
his hair and outfit isn't going to change. His personality can change, his attitude can change, and I think Oscar Isaac is going to carry that. But I don't think that we're going to be able to see, well, each of these personalities has a very distinctive look, style, haircut, because I think they're trying to treat it as a more realistic type of thing. Realistic in quotes, because we have giant Egyptian gods running around and crazy Marvel shit, but as realistic as you can treat it in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, for sure. Kalinowski, I mean, you know, there's a lot of action in the Moon Knight Marvel Comics series all the time. Did you like the sample that we got here in this to kind of give you an idea of what we're going to get?
Yeah, again, I was on board with the whole he doesn't know what's going on, so he goes in flashes. But then when it ended, my response, so he turned to camera, I was like, of course. Like, we got the costume for a second. Of course, it's getting in. So, like, it's so funny. Like Hawkeye and now even Obi-Wan, they just said are getting 2 episodes. Like, Marvel or DC or whatever, their whole Disney Plus, they need to figure that out. Like, why are we going to give 2 for like this one? Would have benefited for 2 episodes, absolutely. And from all the people like yourself, John, that have seen 3 or 4 of them now, everyone's saying 1 and 2 nail it. 3 and 4, they say but I think they would have benefited from another one of sitting down to watch another one. Yeah. Okay. But like we've seen Oscar Isaac doing the stunt choreography with the fight team, so he's getting into some badass scrapes. So we're definitely going to see that.
Okay. So. All right. Now, what about the way he's presented, Mike, as in terms of laying the world out of Stephen Grant? Do you like the way they kind of bring you into him? He's kind of, he's got that British accent, which feels a little put on. Even some of the ways he uses some of the slang feels a bit inauthentic, but I think it's supposed to be a little authentic because he's playing this other character. And he's a gift shop employee. He's got a gold guy who street performs as his best friend at this point. He thinks he's having a date, that he stands up the date. He's not good with women, clearly. And his mom is never there to pick up the phone. And yet he's getting transported in all these places. Did you like the way they present that version of Stephen Grant here in the show?
Well, I did, because again, not knowing anything, like my take on all this is Stephen Grant is a cover. I don't think, like, there is no mom. Like, there's no mom on the other line. Like, all the postcards that he gets from his mom that he's putting up on the wall, half those postcards are on the rack at the gift shop at the British Museum. Like, I'm pretty sure Marc Spector, again, this is me just completely, I think Mephisto's going to show up in the second episode. No, I'm just kidding. No, but it seems to me that Marc Spector had to go deep underground for some reason, and Stephen Grant is the deep underground, but because of the dissociative personality disorder or identity disorder, Stephen Grant doesn't know he's a cover. So he's like living this life, and he's going to find out. But even Konshu calls him like, what? It's the idiot. It's the other one. So, is Stephen Grant a part of Mark's personality? I know, like, in the comics, and actually John and Mike, you can answer this maybe. I was reading about it, and I guess in the comics, like, it's not really clear. Did Marc Spector always have the dissociative identity disorder, or did Khonshu give him dissociative? Like, did becoming Moon Knight give him that disorder? Like, what is the background there, or is it a little bit hazy because there's been so many versions? Yeah,
basically, there's been so many versions.
He's kind of almost like Hawkman in that his history's a mess. Like,
right.
There's never been one person that came in and go, we're clearing up 40 years of this guy, and this is what it's gonna be.
So the thing about
why that Mr. Knight stuff has really taken off, that Mr. Knight, because that was like a through line that everyone got on board with. But like,
and it separates him from Khonshu.
Mr. Knight stuff. And your point, Mike, think about it. Like, I'll bet, because Marvel is Marvel, I'll bet Marc Spector is the main version of this character, this kind of straight-laced, speaking American. And that's the character that's going to be the main through line in the next bunch of episodes, where we're just, because thinking about it now, all the trailers, all we've ever seen of Stephen Grant is already been shown. We never saw, it was all first episode stuff. So that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't go too deep into it because
you can't go too deep.
Episodes, so I'm not trying to give away.
But I do wonder, like, I do think that I think there's an interesting story for Stephen, somebody who's like living this life and then finds out that they're part of this other thing, but Khonshu clearly doesn't have a lot of respect for Stephen, but is Stephen going to step up and become an important part of the Moon Knight sort of world? Or, like, I think there's a lot of interesting things they're going to play, but I think also for the MCU, as we learn about this, we're going to learn the backstory of, did Marc Spector, if he is the main personality, have this disorder when Khonshu found him, or did joining with Khonshu lead to this? But I think those answers are going to be really interesting towards defining what we all think of this show, because like right now it's still just a giant mystery and they've started to unravel it, but we still have a ways to go.
Yeah, and I'll go back to you on this, Kalinowski. Do you like the way they presented Khonshu? I mean, as many times as I've read Khonshu in the comics and listened to his voice in my head, I never thought of F. Murray Abraham's voice. And I kind of like it. F. Murray has a natural dismissive tone, a natural condescending tone to his demeanor. And he's played characters like that in the past many, many times. So was he the right choice, or did you want something more booming or different?
No, like that, again, reading comics, we all kind of put our own voices to what they sound like. So I don't think I ever had one. Okay. But that, like the whole thing with the Jackal character, I'm glad we didn't see much of that, because I think if we would have seen it at full on, I've been like, oh, okay, that's a little wonky looking. But Khonshu, the design of him was great. That scene on the bus where he's passing and he's there and he's gone. Like I think that design was great. So, and the voice was fit perfectly. So I was happy with that.
Okay. Shannon, Mike, what do you guys think of the voice? You like the voice?
I didn't. Okay. For whatever reason.
Shannon's really batting 1,000 on Moon Knight over here.
This is good. It's nice balance. Yeah,
I'm ready for a moon fight.
Oh boy.
Oh god.
I just didn't. I mean, I do like the design. I mean, to Kalinowski's point, that especially that nice wide shot that you see him where Oscar Isaac sees him from inside the bus. I thought the design of that character looks awesome. I don't feel like F. Murray Abraham. I don't know if he just sounds a little too colloquial for me. And I don't know if it's
he's centuries old Egyptian god. He might be a little colloquial.
That's fine. To me, it just does not sound otherworldly enough. Like the
Fair
filter
enough.
they put on his voice was not enough. Like and again, we always construct what we want in a show before we see it. And when we don't get that, like the Seinfeld finale, we are inevitably disappointed. Like in my head, I want to hear some ancient Egyptian that's then followed by English. I want something that's a little more frightening. Okay. And this comes off almost comedic. Now, again, I don't know Moon Knight that well. So as you guys have said, Moon Knight does lean into sort of this quirky comedy. So they could be batting 1,000 and I'm 100% wrong.
But I think you make an excellent point though, Shannon, this idea that we've got to believe, as Kalinowski pointed out, that if Marc Spector is going to come, is going to be this badass, going to be this James Bond type of guy, we got to believe there's somebody that can scare the shit out of this guy to make him become his vessel or his avatar, whether blue or anime, in the real world. And so we've got to really buy into the fear that this god can put in Marc Spector.
Yeah, and just to the Stephen, the way they present the Stephen Grant world, I hope we get some of this, because my guess is that yes, Marc Spector is the primary, but that as the audience, we're watching it through Stephen's eyes. There is such an innate sadness in his existence that he's leaving messages for a mother who doesn't exist. Like he can never actually live because he's not the primary guy. Like he'll never get to have a complete life. I mean, you look at Gus, how he's got the one Nemo like Finn, and it's just like, oh, like Steven, he's incomplete. Like he's always going to be incomplete. The first time he sees Mark in that circular window, it almost looks like a moon, and that's the first time that he's kind of complete. But I think there's just so much interesting material for an actor like Oscar Isaac to mine, and I don't know if there will be the runway to get there.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think that you start the Moon Knight series with Stephen Grant if you're going to just reveal he's all fake and then disappear and it's all Marc Spector all the time. I do think that Stephen Grant realizing that he is a part of this other person's life, and maybe even a part that doesn't really have a life of his own, I think is going to be key to the story they're telling. Like, I think that Stephen Grant figuring out where he fits within the Moon Knight, Marc Spector, Khonshu of it all is, even if that's not what is in the Moon Knight comics, it feels to me like that's the story that we're headed towards here.
Right. And you got to ask yourself, why is Stephen Grant seeing Mark for the first time at this moment, in this episode, What does that mean? What is that leading to? There's a question there for sure. Overall, did you like Khonshu, Mike? Did you like the F. Murray?
So Shannon and I feel very differently about Moonlight. I love, and again, I think this is like the Neil Gaiman in me. I love where you take some ancient, creepy, weird thing and then you do something super colloquial. Like, I think that's great. So I think having this like ancient bird skull alien being like, oh God, this fucking guy. Like, I love it. Like, I think that's hilarious. I'm super into it. Like, I love it.
This moron.
Ah, God, this fucking guy.
All right, let's turn to Mia Calamawy. She comes in going toe-to-toe with Oscar Isaac, going toe-to-toe possibly down the road with Ethan Hawke. An interesting character to bring into this Moon Knight, kind of balance things out. She's half Egyptian in real life as well. And so I thought this was a nice cast. Not that she doesn't have that many credits to her resume. I thought she did a nice job. Kalinowski, you like her in this role?
Yeah,
Does she have shades or vibes of another character in the Moon Knight mythology?
Again, we haven't really seen what happens in Egypt and how he gets with Konshu, and
yes,
like the original with him, he's going there as a mercenary to rob a dig, I think, and he kills Marlena's father,
right? And
he's left for dead by his partner there, and Khonshu revives him to be his avatar. So we don't know. No, she's not that character, and I don't see shades of that. So. Yeah. I don't know, but I know they wanted a different way with it. So what I saw from her was great.
Yeah, and Kalinowski is referencing is Marlene Arlone, who is a character who is an archaeologist and a romantic partner for Marc Spector. She was introduced back in 1976, so they may be using a different name,
right?
Like they're using a different name with Marc Spector and Stephen Grant. I don't know. Shannon, Mia Calamawy?
Well, I mean, she was just on the phone, right?
Yeah.
so based off of that, I mean, it's really difficult for me to make any sort of judgment call on it. I mean, she's got a nice voice. I don't know.
Fair enough.
I mean, we'll see.
Do you like the casting, Vogel? Do you like the look of how she might fit?
I mean, it was a hell of a phone call.
She was in the scene in the gift shop with them when they were setting up the date. Right?
That's not her.
That's not her.
That's a different performer.
That's a different girl. That's a different girl.
Oh, I'm thinking the wrong one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's probably over. That's probably over, I think.
You sure?
Yeah, I think that's probably over.
Okay.
It's 3 days weekend. I think, yeah.
I'm with Shannon. Like, I definitely want to see more. I think the casting is interesting, but like, and this is actually a really nice thing. Like, it's kind of fun to go into a Marvel series where you're like, this actress was cast as a character who is not the character from the comic, which doesn't really bother me one way or the other because I don't really know that character from the comic. So this is a brand new character for me, and I'm excited to get to know her and meet her and say hello.
All right. Well, what about the illusions? Oh, we're going to say something? Go ahead, Callis. Go ahead.
So who was the girl in the gift shop that he worked? She was the tour guide and said, hey, we got our date.
Yeah.
That was the girl
on the phone.
Who clearly had been swept off her feet by Marc Spector.
Yes.
And asked out on a date. Right. And Stephen Grant had no idea who she was. Yeah. And then blacked out for a weekend.
No, it wasn't.
No, she's playing Layla. That was not Layla.
No. That was probably, from looking at the cast list for episode 1, probably Saffron Hawking, who is Dylan.
That's what I'm looking at.
Okay, because Layla on the phone knows Mark, not Stephen.
Right. And Saffron...
Okay.
Or Dylan was on the phone with him when he called and said, "Hey, it's Friday at the restaurant," and she's not there. She's like, it's Sunday there, pal.
All
right.
Saffron Hawking. Yeah, you're right. Saffron Hawking. Okay.
We had some allusions to, real quick before we roll out of here, the Ennead, which is like a Egyptian super god team. That will be interesting, especially with Eternals that we just had with the gods of Eternals. And the gods of Asgard, like this is another set of gods we're bringing in. This is fascinating. What do you guys think?
Yeah, super interesting because, the Asgardians have been retconned to be aliens. The Eternals are space robots. And are the gods of ancient Egypt, are they another sort of extraterrestrial race, or are they actually Egyptian gods? Like that's going to be super interesting to find out. Like, when he said there was only 7 of them versus 9, I put my gumshoe hat on, thinking like, oh, I bet the two that are missing, I bet it's Amit and Konshu. So I looked them up. I was wrong. But I typed it in my notes and I promptly deleted it.
Vogel, do you like the Ennead? Do you like them presenting that? Also,
Yeah.
Atlantis is in a shot there in the show as well. Thoughts on that?
Oh, I didn't see that, but I did like. I mean, I do think Shannon, brings up a good point. Like Marvel, early days, made the choice to make the Asgardians more extraterrestrial in origin, and I think it really worked for them. Like, I think everything they've done with the Asgardians in the MCU, it works. It's great. I love what they've done with it. I love how they've sort of told Norse mythology on a cosmic scale, but it'll be interesting. I don't think that's what they're doing here, and they're really leaning into it. And so bringing in, all the different gods of the different cultures and of the world, like that does open up an entire door of like the supernatural. And, even like Steven at the beginning kind of talking to that girl about the mummification process and how they left the heart, like that's pretty important. Like when Harrow's talking to him about Amit, like kind of referencing the whole like death thing, like the whole Anubis kind of judges Egyptians by putting their heart on a scale where the heart's on one side and there's a feather on the other side. And if your heart is lighter than the feather, you get to go to the afterworld and live your life. And if your heart is heavier than the feather, Amit eats your heart and you're like, fucked up forever. So the fact that they're sort of leading into all of that and kind of building that, like with the scales on his arm and what you're talking about with Amit, like they're not just kind of using it as here's a cool character that we read in a book somewhere, let's do our take on it. Like, given that Harrow is kind of in a cult of Amit, like they're leaning into it heavily. So I'm curious to see how far they go, and I'm curious to see how real the gods of ancient Egypt are in the MCU.
Yeah. Kalinowski, thoughts on the Ennead, thoughts on these gods? I mean, we see them in the Moon Knight comics, but do you see, how do you anticipate how that they might play that out here in the MCU?
I don't know, to be honest. I'll take the loss on that. As far as I don't know, I really don't.
I don't think it's a loss. I'm
just like I'm trying to go back in the like I'm thinking through all the runs of like were they ever a bigger part except for the one god of the Avatar and stuff. And
okay.
I'm just like,
well, let me ask you another question.
I don't think so.
Is Marvel walking back into this danger again with their villains having, hey, our hero is an avatar for one Egyptian god, our villain is an avatar for another Egyptian god, basically the mirror of each other? Is there a danger there, Kalinowski, how they're setting up that?
I think that's the reason why the writer had said they're staying away from Raoul Bushman, because he was Killmonger.
Right.
Basically, and the two relationship between Black Panther and Killmonger, Moon Knight and Bushman, it's like they were like, okay, it's more of the same. We've got to go a different route. So I think they're very aware of not doing that.
Well, and I think like, and that might, again, this is me just like pulling ideas out of my ass, but I think maybe part of the colloquialism of Khonshu is where you're going to get those distinctions. It seems as if the relationship that Marc Spector and Khonshu have, when Khonshu is like, oh God, little idiot, go to sleep, bring out the other one, seems to be a little bit less obsessive than Harrow's relationship with Amit. And so I think that when you have one character that is sort of an avatar for an Egyptian god, where it's much more of like we're on an equal level and we fight and we argue and we bicker like we're a buddy cop team. And then you have like this, I am worshiping this this deity and this whole thing. Like, I think you do draw those differences. So in that way, the parallel could work for them, but we will find out in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, one of the counters, Shannon, to F. Murray Abraham is either Thomas Holtz or Al Pacino. So would any of those voices be good for Amit, in your opinion? Is that a possible?
Oh, boy, Al Pacino all the way. We can only be so lucky. Hey, if Moon Knight's comedy is as quirky as you all say it is, bring on Hooah!
That would be very interesting, for sure. All right, any final words here as we wrap up about this first episode? Vogel, I'll go back to you as we do here to end the show.
I'm just really stoked. It it's fun to be in a part of the Marvel universe that I'm not as familiar with. And it's fun, like I said, to be watching these actors on our Disney Plus screen that are just like top tier actors delivering like A+ performances. So I'm really curious to see where this goes. And then my head can't help but start to wonder, even though I'm glad, like Kalinowski said, that we're not necessarily fully in the MCU in episode 1, what their plans for Moon Knight are. Like where all of these characters, you know, Moon Knight, the Black Knight, Blade, like all these supernatural characters that are kind of coming into the MCU. Like we talk about this when we've done the reviews on Eternals. We've talked about it with No Way Home. We've talked about everything, like with Shang-Chi. Like there are so many threads here right now between, Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Val putting together her team and what the Ten Rings are and what the signal is and what's going on with the Eternals and the Celestials. And now we've got all this weird supernatural Egyptian shit happening. Like it's a whole lot. And knowing Marvel, I'm sure they do have a plan. But hell, if I can figure out what it is, and it's going to be fun to see how it all comes together.
Yeah, agreed. And the Inuit stuff, just throw my 2 cents in. I mean, people have always speculated that it was aliens that built the pyramids. So that could be an interesting way to kind of open the door to Egyptian gods in that manner. I'm thinking of that dude from the meme.
From Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, Ancient Aliens. Kalinowski, final thoughts here on episode 1?
I gotta say this. Yeah, again, interesting thing for me because I have such a take on the character that I love, and this has given me something that I was not expecting. I wasn't going the way I wanted it to with characters that I didn't really care for, and it makes me go into an open mind. It's kind of like with Mike Vogel, and we couldn't have an episode without this. Like he loves Superman, and Man of Steel wanted to do a different take on it, but Mike Vogel was like, F that and F that man. I'm never watching those films, and Zack Snyder giving credit. But I'm going into Moon Knight going, hey, it's not the Moon Knight I wanted. It's not the Stephen Grant, the suave playboy.
No, bring in the dead horse. I got to whip it.
It's going to be something that I'm not used to, not expecting, and I'm along for the ride because I want to see where
I do want to apologize to Mike Kalinowski. It is a shame that I like almost every version of Superman except that one, which clearly makes me only like the original Superman.
And if you're open for some more discussion about it, I recently recorded an episode of Rotten Tomatoes is Wrong and defended Man of Steel. That episode is out now on podcast. So
I know. I listened to it and then threw it in the garbage.
Thank you, my friend. Shannon McClung, final thoughts.
So to add on to the cast, I mean, Vogel talking about Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke. I mean, the supporting cast in this is great. I mean, specifically the 2 museum employees, Lucy Thackeray as Donna and Alexander Cobb as JB, the security guard. There is nothing funnier to me than a dismissive Brit. And having 2 of them, I mean, especially the JB role, because that is the type of role that Kalinowski and I and John, when he was still acting, that's the stuff we went out for on the rig. So when you have a performer who is given a limited amount of space and make the most of it, my hat is always off to them. I'm like, just such two very, very funny performances. And the second, like, even though this episode did not necessarily, check off all the boxes for me, I'm still so jazzed to get a new character in the MCU, and I'm so jazzed to talk about it with my 3 buddies here.
There you go. Thank you very much, Shannon. Yeah, and Donna, Lucy Thackeray's role, there is a Donna in the Moon Knight world. She is his publicist. But in this world, she is his boss. So very interesting stuff to play around. And JB may be similar to someone else the way we may be seeing. I don't know. I honestly do not know. That we may have seen in the comics in the past. So kind of interesting to lay those groundwork and give you time with those characters. That can't be an accident. So I'm sure there's more to come there. All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for the spoiler review here of episode 1 of Moon Knight. We appreciate it madly. And real quick, before we get into our goodbyes, I just want to say thanks again to Carbon Health, who powers and sponsors the Outlaw Nation and the Geek Buddies. Carbon Health, they have 100+ locations in 14 states, 50+ locations in California across the Bay Area. Most locations still have COVID testing. We're still getting tested for this stuff, people. And if you're in California, consider scheduling an annual checkup and utilizing primary care services at your local clinic. The primary care providers listen up, follow up after appointments, and they bring compassion to their everyday work. And they continue to partner with us because they believe and genuinely care about positive communities who engage with each other for the love of culture and expressions of life. So thank you very much, Carbon Health, for powering.
If you wake up in Germany and your jaw is broken, it will be nice to have a doctor in your pocket.
So true. So true. All right, Shannon, what do we have to tell them?
Yeah, I'd like to follow us on social media. On Twitter, it's at @geek_buddies. On Instagram, at @the_geek_buddies. If you'd like to follow me on social media, I immediately went to how do you say Carbon Health in German? If you would like to follow me on social media, on Twitter, it's at @Shannon_McClung. On Instagram, it's Shannon the Geek Buddy. If you would like to follow Mr. Vogel, it is at MK2. And if you would like to follow Mr. Rocha, Schnell, it's at The Rocha Says.
Mikey?
Well, if you enjoyed this review and you want to spend many more weeks having Kalinowski make Superman digs at me that I roll my eyes about, here's what you can do to help us continue doing it. You can go ahead and hit the like button below. Please, right now while I'm saying it, hit that like button. Subscribe to Johnny's Outlaw Nation page. Check out all the amazing content he's got going on there. Leave your comments below. What did you think of the first episode? Were you kind of a downer about it like Shannon, or did you love it like me? Let us know what you guys thought about that. If you do know a lot about the Moon Knight comic like these other two gentlemen, definitely drop some of that in the chat. Let us know in the comments what they got right, what they got wrong, where you think it's going to go. If you are listening to us right now on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere podcasts are available, take a second to leave us some stars, leave us some comments, helps us go up in the rankings of entertainment podcasts so other people can find us. And as always, the best thing that you guys can do is retweet this video, post it on your socials, send it to your friends, and tell everybody to hang out with your buddies, the Geek Buddies.
Absolutely. And Mike Kalinowski, thanks again for joining us, brother. I hope
always
you
a pleasure,
us.
gentlemen.
I hope you
Yes,
can join
sir.
us for the whole run, my man. Please let people know where they can find you and where to get your book.
At Mike Kalinowski, all my socials, myself and Brad Gilmore's book, Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble. It's out there. It's selling. I'm eventually, I know people have reached out to me about personalized copies and autograph. I'm trying to work out a way to do that. So
Nice.
how to do it, make it feasible and stuff for everybody.
Yeah, it's a book about James Bond, ladies and gentlemen.
James Bond, history of James Bond. It's all about James Bond.
60th anniversary with not one Bond.
No, man. That
presented.
anniversary tribute at the Oscars was a disgrace. couldn't even get any of the Bonds to do it. Not even anyone involved with the franchise. You got Tony Hawke and the redhead skater guy. Okay,
And Kelly
I digress.
Slater.
And Kelly Slater. And a surfer. Which
All right, let's get out of
James Bond surf at some point? I mean,
He did several times.
He does come out of the water there. All right, thank you all so much. We'll talk to you next time with another brand new spoiler review episode here for Moon Knight from the
Geek
Buddies!
Hey!